Hi, everyone. Nice to see you today. I am Kirian Koza, Director of Global Operations and Member Experience at Executive Forums, and welcome to today's Expert Insight. So as always, we are recording for our Member Resource Center, and we will leave time at the end for question and answer. In our recent Expert Insights over the past months, we've been speaking about the impact and lasting ripple effect that the pandemic has really had on our workforce. These emerging generational and talent shifts that we have seen result in things like the Great Resignation. We have spoken about the importance of honing in, understanding, and evolving our business cultures in order to leverage these changes and win in what is quickly becoming a battle for top talent. So today's talk kind of takes that a step further. We're going to explore a practical approach in culture change, and one that starts with you at the top. Today, we explore the power of coaching as a leadership style. Now, in the past, in simple terms, leaders knew what they needed to get done. They taught or guided others how to do it, and then evaluated performance year in and year out. And command and control was the name of the game, but not anymore. So we live in a world of constant flux and disruption. And to cope with this, companies are moving towards something very different. A model that develops the ability to facilitate and harvest the collective wisdom of our teams, in which employees learn how to adapt to constantly changing environments in ways that unleash fresh energy, innovation, and commitment. In this radical reimagining of organizational structures, the leader becomes more like a conductor who co-creates with talented players. The genius lies with the system, not in the head of the leader. The role of the leader, in short, is being recast in the form of a coach. So here to guide us on the topic, and whose words I have been reading, is expert Jillian Sape, a former entrepreneur and business leader who came to coaching and leadership development following the acquisition of his London-based premium hospitality business that he founded in 2003. Today, Julian coaches CEOs, boards, and executive teams. He also runs leadership development programs internationally, teaches coaching as a leadership style as part of several executive education courses, and publishes regularly in Forbes magazine, among others. Alongside his coaching practice, Julian is an investor and advisory board member. Julian, thank you so much for being with us today as we talk about the leader as coach. So our platform is yours. Welcome.
Thank you, Carrie-Anne. Well, it's great to be here. I can't see you, which isn't my preferred format, but hopefully we'll have some interaction at the end. So I'm going to be speaking for about 40 minutes on the topic, the leader as coach. And let me give you a little overview first of how that 40 minutes is going to pan out. First of all, I want to present some context, how we came here, how we came to this title. And I want to look at it, first of all, from a personal point of view, my own business journey and how I ended up doing this work today. But also, what is the context of this work in our business and corporate systems? And then looking at coaching and its competencies, and I will define what those are in the context of leadership and how they are relevant, but also competencies that actually encapsulate human potential. What is it that coaches do that actually is fundamental to us as human beings? Now, may I just say, as I'm talking, I can't see myself, so I hope you can. Are we all good, Carrie-Anne? I then want to go on and talk a little bit about the zeitgeist, the spirit of our age. Where are we today as a society? And understanding our reality as a starting point for the work we need to do in terms of our shift. I then want to look at the essence of coaching itself and how it can help us with the shift that I'm going to describe. And then to introduce a toolkit, a coaching toolkit that leaders can learn from. What is it that coaches do what is it about the embodied coach that could define leadership in the future? And then finally, with all this in mind and body, how does this apply to our future? How can we use this new approach to reimagine, to reinvent old structures that might not be serving us well? So to start with, my personal story, which I want to spend as little time as possible on. How did I come to this work? Well, I was an entrepreneur for 15 years, driven by ego, by energy and drivers that were really about me, and quite naturally found my own sort of personality style of leadership. And that brought me success, but it also brought me a lot of anxiety. And it was the anxiety piece. I saw things unfolding successfully in business, but inside I felt anxious, and I didn't understand this disconnection between the two. And it was that moment of self-inquiry, why do I feel this way, that led me into the world of personal development and coaching. And then more generally about human beings, the potential we have, the roles we play, and how we sabotage that potential. My entrepreneur journey finished with the acquisition of the business that I founded, and I hadn't really thought about life after it, because my super objective was to get the business over the line and realize the value that we had built over 15 years. But it was beyond that exit that I had this period of reinvention. Who am I professionally and also as a human being? And I spent a short time, a frustrating time, I might say, as a business mentor, basically selling my business narrative, which I'm certainly not here to do today. This is what I did. You can do the same. Here's the toolkit. And that sort of generated a lot of nods and smiley faces, but didn't really generate change in people's lives and in their work and purpose. And it was only when I came to coaching that the penny dropped. And I realized that your growth, your development is unrelated to my experience. For you to simply re-optimize everything that I've done would be meaningless. And what coaching does is creates a space where you can realize who you are, what is going on, and what you would like to change. And the coach is the facilitator of that process. And for me, that was a moment of magic. And I'll talk about what that magic is about. I call it self-transcendence. So I retrained as a coach and literally walked into this sweet shop of possibility in terms of work. And today I work in corporate and business systems. I work with entrepreneurs, but I also work with government and teaching leadership, but also coaching in real time. And they are different things. But the golden thread is helping CEOs and businesses to thrive by letting go. There's something about being liberated from an idea of what should be happening and accepting what is happening and allowing a better future to emerge. And I'll explain more about that. So my relationship with this work was, first of all, recognizing the challenges in leaders and CEOs that I could bring. It was sort of implicit in the coaching conversation. But also this idea that we can reimagine our business systems. And at the outset of my journey, I read an incredible book by Frederic Laloux, which many of you will know, called Reinventing Organizations. And the strapline is, this is the lovely bit, inspired by the next stage of human consciousness. So the power is not at the top. And this is a book about the breakdown of hierarchy. What is hierarchy standing in the way of, and why are we sort of afraid to let go of it? And then beyond business systems, what is it about coaching and its competencies that invite us to look at what is undeveloped in human beings generally? So what I'd like to do is define coaching, first of all, just so we understand what it means. And for me, the coach in the coaching space is the facilitator of understanding what is happening now and allowing what needs to emerge to unfold. So it's a sort of evolution from the old idea of goals and this sort of linear approach to achieving your goals, and more about, if we truly recognize what is and accept what is, something new will come from that realization. So that is my definition of coaching. And then if we look at our governing body, the ICF, the International Coaching Federation, the ICF list 8 core competencies that define best practice coaching. And rather than read them out to you as a list, I just want to reflect on them as human potential. And they are presence and embodiment, the ability to relate, active listening, evoking awareness, and challenge and action. The ability to facilitate learning and growth, and also ethical conduct. So these are core competencies for best practice coaching, but they are also invitations to who we could become as human beings. So I want to put a slide on the screen. I think I've been seeing it intermittently. Here it is. Yeah. Okay. So this to me is the zeitgeist. This is sort of the spirit of our age. On the one hand, we've got this super trajectory of progress, sort of unprecedented levels of innovation, creativity, technology, digital transformation. Literally, it is the proverbial rocket going into space. And then underpinning that is this sort of nebulous, influx, uncertain feeling of well-being, or lack of it, because there is a sort of disconnection. I think this illustration points out the disconnection between the trajectory of success. We're all on this rocket of aspiration, but beneath it is this sort of who am I, where am I going, a sort of restlessness. So for me, this is the zeitgeist. This is a snapshot of where we are. And unfortunately, it generates a problem, which is the mental health crisis that we know, the depletion of our environment, and generally, I would say a mood of division, and I think restlessness is probably the best way I can describe it. So the opposite of that, or the evolution from that, is this idea of alignment, where this graph becomes a circle of flow and more balance. So if this is the stage of consciousness that we're at, how do we move away from it? So Einstein says we can't, it's one of my favorite quotes, Einstein says we can't solve our problem from the same level of consciousness that created it. So who is going to help us with this shift? and what is going to help us with this shift. Okay, we can take the slide down now. So first of all, we have to become aware of the structures that are keeping us in this shift. What is this mantra of success and disconnection? The mantra of success and the ensuing disconnection. And this disease that I talk about, it literally is a disease, is the disease of personality. That we believe that personality is something we can get better at, and when we get better at it, all will be well. And we have to understand where this comes from. Ben Zander, in his book, The Art of Possibility, talks about personality as the thing we do, with a capital D, that has allowed us to bypass and cut through the insoluble challenges of childhood. So personality becomes our survival sword and shield. It's the thing that allows us to cut through and makes us successful. And because it sort of saves us from what we are leaving behind, we become very attached to it, and it becomes our conceptual identity. I am this, I am CEO, I am partner, I am lawyer, we start to become identified with the roles we play, the professional roles we play. But when we do that, we leave something behind. Our wholeness, our true nature. So that is the first thing, the sort of the hard holding on to this idea of personality and success. In fact, someone on a program I ran with the government of Canada was astonished to find out that she wasn't her strengths. You know, this idea that we keep playing hard to our strengths, but actually our strengths and weaknesses are two sides of the same coin, which is another workshop. But we are vulnerable in our tunnel vision of this personality-led style of success and leadership. Then there are the systems themselves. I talked before about hierarchy. You know, the old systems that we know of family, of corporate life, of organized religion, of education, and these are top-down structures where the answers supposedly are at the top. And when the answers are at the top and the rest of us are sort of not knowing, then we only have two choices. One is to comply or one is to resist. So top-down systems, hierarchical systems, tend to generate compliance or resistance. And Carrie-Anne alluded to the Great Resignation. You know, this is the manifestation of deep levels of isolation and mistrust, both at the top, actually, because the top is lonely, and within the system where there is a lack of purpose. Why am I here? What am I here for? So this work, this shift that I'm talking about and how coaching can help the shift is about reimagining this idea of power. The power doesn't belong with anything or anyone. Power it's innate in all of us and in everything. So that's the sort of the personal stuck we're in. The next has been the corporate, the systemic stuck we're in. And then finally, we have a societal one where every geopolitical, talked about issue, it results in some kind of division, that we see life through a binary thinking lens. So if you think of all the current affair issues generally, and I mean, it's exemplified in binary politics. The beauty parade of political parties and their leaders is a good example of it. And this call, we're seeing these trends for diversity and inclusion, which is more than just a corporate buzzword. It is about this need for oneness, for interconnectedness. Even the duality of man and nature objectifies nature. It's a sort of reductionist lens that we look at nature, and so it then becomes, in our blind spot, it becomes depleted. So actually the wake-up call is we are nature. It is part of our essence. So that's a little bit about the Zeitgeist. Let me share with you Otto Scharmer from the Presencing Institute in DC, Otto Scharmer's theory U. So this is the U, the metaphorical U. On the left is where we are, and on the right is our best possibility. If we can just slow down with the slides. So on the right is our best possibility. So on the left is what I've been describing. It's where we are. It's our old structures. It's our past conditioning, our habitual behavior, and just downloading what we already know. So we have to be aware of that first. The movement away from that into a reimagined future is through letting go of something that is no longer serving us well. And so in the next slide, we see between where we are now, what we know, and our best possibility is a blind spot. And it's leadership's role, for which coaching helped to awaken this space in between the two poles of the U. And we do this through letting go, mindfulness, which I'll talk about, and self-management. Self-management means letting go of the story of me. Because if I live in the story of me, then I actually don't see what is really happening with my people, with my system, and in the world. And when we let go, in the next slide, we reach a sense of empty presence. It's the starting point. It's Otto Scharmer talks about the artist's blank canvas. This is the starting point for what we don't know yet. And if we sit in that sort of emptiness and observe and allow, letting go of the old, letting come the new, something new emerges. And see the next slide. And when something new emerges, this is when we can harness that new creativity. It's a sensing exercise. And the crystallization of this new emergence is what we call today strategy or planning or challenge. But we can't strategize at the start. We have to know what is and what could be. And when we're all clear about what could be, then we can harness that energy into a plan. So there is form and process, but there's a formlessness that we can't avoid. So we can lose that slide. So how do we reinvent what is stuck? And who will do this? Who will lead us out of the stuck? So everything that we know today in terms of our systems and the power structures of our relationships can be turned on its head by this coaching approach. And there are three pillars of what is required to turn this power structure that we know around. So I'm going to go through three aspects of the leader as coach. The first one is self-transcendence. The second one is the ability to sense and be attuned. And the third one is about emergence and recognizing what is emerging. So let me go through those three pillars. So self-transcendence sounds complicated. Let me see if I can illustrate it with the story that Otto Scharmer tells at the beginning of Theory U. He was 9 years old or 10 years old and was called home from school because there was a family emergency. And as he walked towards the farm that he had grown up in, that had belonged to his family for generations, the whole thing was on fire, literally burning to the ground. And he looked at this symbol of his life that contained all the content of his experience going up in smoke. And his question to himself was, if I lose the content of my experience, who am I? And it's a question for us all. Who are we before the content of our experience? And the answer is akin to presence, consciousness, and being. And when we can know that state, it's not even a state. State objectifies it. It is being. When we know that, we are open to new possibility. But if we believe that the content of our experience is who we are, then we stand in the way of what we don't know yet. And this is what coaches do at the outset in fact, it's something that occupies the coach's approach throughout. How can I get out of my own way? There's a famous coaching book called Taming the Advice Monster. The coach holds the space for others to realize their own potential. So this is, Otto Scharmer talks about going from ecosystem to ecosystem. How can I get out of my own way? And that is a lifelong discipline, because we are conditioned, as I talked about, to drive hard what we believe are our sort of personal strengths. So that's self-transcendence, sensing. I have to sense what's going on. So let me tell you what I'm sensing now. I can't see my face on the screen as I did in our technical rehearsal. And so I'm sensing a little bit of discomfort. So that's me sensing what is happening right now. So Yuval Harari, who you'll know, who wrote Sapiens, he did a brilliant interview in India about meditation. He talks about his first experience with meditation, how he couldn't sit still for 10 seconds. He was asked to observe the breath coming in and out of his nostrils. And he said he just couldn't do it. He just couldn't sit still. He was immediately distracted. And in the interview, he reflects, he goes, if I can't sit still for 10 seconds and observe the breath coming in and out of my nostrils, and just to sit with that as some kind of, this is what's really happening, how can I possibly know what's going on in the world for real? How can I understand what's really happening in our systems? How can I understand what's happening with my partner, with my colleague, if I'm not attuned to what is happening? So again, sensing what is happening right now is our only starting point for growth and change. And then finally, the third pillar is emergence. And I talked about, in Otto Scharmer's theory U, this idea of sensing what is happening now, letting go of it, not attaching ourselves to it, and allowing what needs to emerge to come. So those are the sort of three philosophical pillars of change work with a sort of coaching methodology. So let's move from philosophy to toolkit. What is it that coaches actually do that leaders can learn from? So I'd like to share some slides here and demonstrate this idea with a metaphor. I'll call it the ripple effect, which is basically the pebble in the water. You drop a pebble in a still pool and concentric circles oscillate outwards. Sorry, can we go back to the first slide? So the first slide is you. This is the pebble in the water. This is you present, in stillness, aware. The coach holds the space in stillness for the other person. And when there's stillness, there's something authentic about that moment. No one's trying to bring an agenda or sabotage it. And so we move on to the next circle, which is the circle of trust. We co-create our relationship. It's not based on a predetermined script of this is what I do and this is what you will do. This is us defining our relationship. Yeah, co-creating the relationship. That applies for all interpersonal systems, personal and professional. And then when that relationship is defined, then we can explore. So the next circle is, I call it landscaping. It's in green. This is where we are listening to what's happening, asking open questions. Open questions create new possibility. And I'll talk about the power of open questions and listening in a bit. But this idea of evoking awareness creates space and possibility, new possibility. And then the next circle in gray is the circle of ambiguity, because everything is ambiguous. We live in a paradox of knowing and not knowing, of everything and nothing. And we have to be able to sit with that not knowing. And it's uncomfortable for most people. And problems start where you start trying to fill that not knowing, trying to create certainty where it's not there. But if we can sit with the not knowing, we actually, we are at our most receptive and actually most powerful. Because when we are open and receptive, we sense what is needed. And that's about emergence. And then finally, the golden circle, things have become clear. We've sensed what needs to emerge, and then we harness that energy into action and challenge. And then, of course, this circle is also about learning. And the whole coaching journey is about learning. There's no finite point where anything arrives. It's a constant unfolding of possibility. And even in the coach's work, and this is non-performance work, not client work, this is about continuous professional development. So these themes of self-transcendence, holding the space for others, facilitating learning in a system is ongoing part of a coach's reflection. So we can take down those slides now. So just to summarize that sort of toolkit into the things coaches do, and this is where the ICF, the International Coaching Federation's core competencies align with behaviors. Although they're more than behaviors, they're sort of they're embodied states of being, I would say. Because we can't learn leadership from a book. You can't learn empathy because it says so in the Harvard Business Review. Empathy is embodied, and that is a practice. So, self-inquiry and self-management. How can I bring my empty authenticity into a situation to allow others to do the same? And then co-creating the relationship, creating safety. And I want to, again, give an example of the humility that's required to create safety. We hear about psychological safety, but there's some humility required of the coach and also of the leader to do this. Let me give you a story. Jerry Gates, who was CEO of Payments Canada, who I worked with, talked about his first experience in management. And he was 24, 25, and he was thrown into a role where he basically felt out of his depth. His team, the team he was assigned with, were much older than him. And he was aware of being out of his depth. And what he did so simply and so beautifully was to lean into what was real. And that is to state the obvious. I am younger than you. You have more experience than I do, and I have a lot to learn from you. And that excites me. But I'm also honored to have this position, and I'm really looking forward to what we can do together. So that is creating something real with a bit of humility. Conversely, someone else I coached, a newly appointed young manager, he was head of innovation in a global logistics firm, was given this senior role and managing a team, most of whom were twice his age, one of whom had applied unsuccessfully for the job that this young manager now had. And the manager came to me in coaching and said, I just can't get this team to mobilize. There's just so much obstruction in this team. There's just resistance everywhere. I can't get them to commit. And the elephant in the room was the fact that the people he needed to find alignment with were harboring this resistance about his new appointment. And he knew that, but he avoided it because it was too uncomfortable to face it. So we worked on this idea of, I talk about leaning in, coaches lean in, deepening the connection and moving towards what is real, which is, I sense this resistance because of, and allowing people to explain what it is that is happening for them. So in the former story, the leader leans in and senses what is real. And in the latter example, the leader is avoiding. So first of all, creating that connectedness is an authentic connection is paramount. Then this idea of listening and awareness. And I want to put up quickly, I know we're running out of a little bit of time, but put up Otto Scharmer's 4 levels of listening. Just to give you an idea of different levels of listening potential and what coaches aspire to. So level 1 is ego listening. This is what Otto Scharmer calls downloading. All I'm doing is reconfirming what I already know. I see everything through the lens of my own judgment and perception. Level 2, we move away from that slightly, and factual listening, we start disconfirming. It's something is new. We notice something different. Level 3 is empathetic listening. This is where we see through the story that we're hearing. What is the feeling center behind that story? This is very, very important. This is not a soft skill. It's actually the hardest skill to muster. Stephen Covey talks about when we show empathy to another, their defensiveness drops. And when their defensiveness drops, their creativity and vibrancy and possibility rises up. That's when things happen. So actually, empathy is a powerful tool to mobilize people. But beyond empathy, beyond just the validation of another person's feeling center, is generative listening. And this is holding the space, and I'm going to come on to how we hold the space with open questions, holding the space for a better future to emerge. So I talked about before about leaders do not like uncertainty and looking to find a way to tidy things up, to join the dots. And if we do that, we sabotage what could be. And generative listening is about creating a space where others can create their own possibility and their own future. It also allows them to take responsibility for themselves, which lets leaders off the hook. So 4 levels of listening. not necessarily incrementally better, but certainly in terms of impact, there are huge differences. Okay, we can lose that slide. So holding the space means being present and creating a space where what is innate in the other person, be it the coachee, the employee, the team, the system, what is innate can have room to realize itself. Because if I tell you what to do, as I said before, you will either comply or resist. But if I ask you how you see things and then don't say any more, the open question has no answer per se, but it generates an energetic possibility in the other. If I ask you how you see things, then we open a door to possibility and self-responsibility as well. Because when I ask you what you see, you have to take responsibility for yourself. So this is the win-win of this coaching approach, is there's no direction required. They're techniques and being embodied, but there's no direction required. And that's a win-win for the leader who feels accountable to the system to have the answers, to have the way. And it's a win-win for the system itself that can rise up and realize its own potential. And then strategy is the icing on the cake. When we know what we're all sensing and where we're going, the commitment can't help itself. The plan can't help itself. And then finally, reflecting on all of this. So we are an outcomes obsessed world, but our biggest blind spot is to believe that our success is sort of finite. So, but if we're always evaluating and soften our attachment to these terms, success and failure, if we're always in a learning groove, then we are always growing. So that is an overview of coaching, its philosophy, its competencies, and some tools: better listening, open questions, evaluating, learning. Where does this leave us now in terms of this new shift in consciousness that I started? You know, what can this bring to our zeitgeist? How can we reimagine what is? So the first question I'd like to ask is who, in terms of these power structures that we all know, parents, children, teachers, pupil, politicians, voters, leaders, employees, who is in charge in the coaching relationship? The coach or the coachee? Where does the power lie? Well, the power is innate in the relationship. The coach takes responsibility for themselves, and that means holding the space, not getting in the way of the other, facilitating the other's inner dialogue, but for the other person also to be accountable to who they are and to be truthful about what is inside them. So this coaching relationship for me is a microcosm of our potential, for the potential of our system, interpersonal systems in the future, at work and in life. Then it starts to get exciting because everyone then starts to take responsibility. We're not blaming, we're not projecting. Then we get into this vision of the teal organization in business terms that Frederick Laloux is talking about. This is the world of self-organization, self-managing teams. Can we put the slide up, please? So Harrison Owen, in his book, The Power of Spirit, How Organizations Transform says that if it turns out that human systems can self-organize in the same way that natural systems do, it might transpire that all the hard work we've done in the name of our corporate systems, business systems, might have been a waste of time. Because we're not talking about leaders, we're talking about leadership as a collective consciousness, where we are all embodied, where we all hold the space for ourselves and for the other. And what's happening within that is our collective wisdom, our intuitive intelligence is becoming the thing that leads us. Thank you.
Thanks, Julian. So many great things. I had just so many things coming to mind and resonating as we heard you speaking. For me, specifically, the comply or resist and how that's kind of manifested into what it is today. And I wanted to ask a question about, and so everyone, the question and answer is now starting, so feel free to put your questions in the chat. One that I wanted to kind of start with is this idea of how can we see reality for what it is? And do you think that our leaders and CEOs are doing that today with what is happening in the workforce? Because I feel that over the past year or even more, we've been talking about these shifts that are happening. We've been talking about the ripple effects of the pandemic. And yet we still are arriving at this point of a manifestation of resistance and mistrust and loneliness. And we haven't really found a way, an actionable way to combat that. And sometimes I feel like we have a discourse with leaders of, yes, we're going to do things differently, but it's so much easier to just open up the business and the office and go back to the way things have always been. And how do you see that? Are we seeing reality for what it is right now?
Wow, that's a big question. We can only start this work right now. I can only answer that question by working with you to say what is happening for you right now in terms of what is at the source of that question. Yeah. So, in terms of the ripple effect we've been talking about, we can only do this work in the space that we're in. Because if I start telling everybody what's going on in the world, I'm completely bypassing what is happening for them in that moment. So we can only, this was the point of my concentric circles. I can only start the answer to that question with you. And then whatever comes from that experience for you ripples out into your conversation with the next person.
Yeah. And go ahead.
No, and so I suppose this is the power of coaching is that in terms of a CEO and his organization or a business leader and their people, we can only start answer that question in the present moment with the leader themselves of what is happening now. So it's not something we can jump to the meta view of, albeit the meta view is one view we do need to take. We can only start with what is happening right now.
Yeah, I love that. And so that kind of brings me to this next question, which is, how can leaders kind of take that first step or look at and generate some awareness around where they are as leaders? Am I being a coach? Am I doing some of these things? What are some things that they can start looking at within their own organizations?
Okay, so the first thing to say is that the leader as coach is not a role for the leader, because actually leadership is about powerful, intuitive responses to anything that happens in any given moment. So it's not. This talk is not about leaders going and becoming coaches. This is what does the embodied coach do that leaders can learn from?
Yeah.
And that might be a whole range of responses to any situation. So this is not about being a coach. This is about when I am open and aware, when I hold the space for others, I become more receptive, more aware, generate more possibility than I do when I arrive in a space with my own predetermined script and call the shots.
Yeah, I love that. So we talk so much about assessment sometime and what is your leadership style? We need to define something. So I love that viewpoint.
Yeah.
And that contrast to kind of what we've been sometimes categorized as leaders. That this isn't just.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. What is the opposite of the category?
Yeah. I love that. So we also had we mentioned commitment. So and looking for commitment in our teams. And I think now that we've got this thing where we've got 4 generations working together, and how does this help us lead and have a leadership that can listen and make that space for 4 different generations, working together and different levels of commitment and showing up for that.
So again, this isn't about a formula or a template. This is about, if you, Carrie-Anne, sense that I'm genuinely invested in the spirit of who you truly are, and we understand where our mutual purpose aligns, then neither of us can help but be committed to what we sense. So I think that's that leaning in to co-creating real relating, being clear. This is why I'm here. This is my purpose. This is why I come to work. Why do you come to work? Where are we aligned on why we are here? And then celebrating what we discover. And that is the intangible essence of creating good workplace relationships. And from there comes all the things that we try so hard to get right: strategy, planning, commitment, accountability. But that is, as I said, it's the icing on the cake. What is foundational is the acknowledgement of what is real. What is my purpose? What is your purpose? How are we aligned? We might not be aligned, in which case, why are we trying to make this work?
Yeah. So you mentioned something there about the future. And I wanted to ask if you had to think about the future of teams and, as a coach and in your experience and what people are being driven by and kind of, we can see this effect. We can see that something is happening here. If we had to look at teams in a few years or further out even, what would you say is going to be changing? How are we going to be the incoming talent that's coming through business schools and coming up into the workforce? What are they going to be bringing to the table in terms of this methodology?
Yeah, there's a lot to discuss there, which we don't have time for, but just sort of 2 pointers.
Yeah.
One is Lalou talks about in reinventing organizations, the idea of the boss, even the leader might become obsolete. The leadership is a collective consciousness, and we might be better served just with people who can facilitate the process. Yeah. People who can facilitate teams to realize what they do so well already. So the first of all is there's the issue of traditional power in roles becoming obsolete and facilitation being the leading way. That's one theme. And then the other one about, the mindset of people coming out of business schools. I teach in a business school. The level of the conditioned mind is astonishing. How people want to get roles where they are told what to do because they don't have any sense of their own true possibility. When I get into this role and this person validates me and gives me all this money, then I will be a complete human being. There is that mindset in business schools. I'm getting this qualification to cash in on being realized by someone else. And actually, we need to shift from sort of transactional relationships to systems that allow people to sort of actualize and realize who they are.
I like that. That's something I think it's going to be a totally different experience.
Yeah.
When we're
I mean, transactions are fine, and transactional relationships are fine. There's nothing wrong with them, but we have leaned so hard into them. They've become just the currency of our age. You do this and I will reward you, leaves behind the spirit of the human being.
That the idea of that well-being, and how can that go with success tomorrow? How can those better align? So we're coming to the end, and I just wanted, so there was a question in the chat as well about if we're going to be able to share that slide on the four levels of listening.
Sure.
So I also screenshotted that because we've been talking about the U theory recently in Executive Forum. So I thought that was really interesting. So we'll make sure that we get that out to our members. And I wanted to just let everyone know where you can. So we've just posted in the chat where you can find Julian. So his LinkedIn profile and the link to his organization and coaching. Feel free to reach out to Julian and dive deeper into these topics. It's going to be an interesting year. And I think that this is one of the topics that we've seen that can absolutely help transform organizations, take next steps into what will be a great level of shifts and change within the workforce itself. So thank you so much, Julian, for being with us today. It was absolutely insightful. We've been publishing and we'll continue to publish some of your work that has been published in Forbes. If you search even on Forbes, you'll find Julian's work as well, if you want to take a few minutes to get some additional insights and reading in. So thank you again for being with us, and we'll wrap up the expert insight with that.
Thank you, Carrie Ann. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.